Everything went dark before my eyes. I tried to take my last breath, but my lungs filled with water. That seems to be the end. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. A sinking mermaid. What a stupid situation. I just wanted attention because my parents ignored me since childhood. I dreamed of having millions of subscribers, but I barely had 100 on my blog in 3 years. I complained to my parents, but they only waved their hand and left to hang out. Because I was born when they were teenagers, Mom and Dad didn't get enough of it. But I can do anything without them. I constantly monitor trends and so came across on YouTube on a show of people with superpowers. But when I saw the account of the winner, Fire Girl, my jaw almost dropped. She kept fire in the palm of her hand and was not burned. That Fire Girl gained 1 million subscribers in a couple of days. Then I decided that I would come up with a superpower and I would become popular. The whole next week, I was making something up, hiding lighters in my sleeves, trying to break the table, but nothing worked out. In fact, what power are we talking about? If I spent all my time at school and swimming training, that's it! Swimming, I couldn't control the water, but what if I would become a mermaid? I bought different fabrics and quickly made a tail, and after that, I posted several videos and the image of a mermaid, but there was only hatred in the comments. How so? You can't break me easily. I said that when I got into salt water, I became a mermaid, and on land, I was a regular person. I decided to record the video to prove it, then I went to the pool near the house. But as soon as I put on my tail and filmed how I added salt to the water, somebody knocked on the gate. Who's there? Parents left for some party for the weekend. Suddenly, some dude with a camera tumbled into the yard. Seeing me, he stared and then clapped with delight. He said he was the director of a show about superhumans. Wow, he saw my channel and decided that he wanted to make a live stream about the life of a mermaid. A live stream? I couldn't believe my ears. The director went on, a week live and you'll be like a fire girl, honey. You're a real mermaid, aren't you? Prove it to the audience. And you will be a star. I already imagined millions of subscribers and immediately agreed. But as soon as the director left, I realized that I was in over my head. How was I supposed to prove it? The audience would look at my every move. I didn't sleep all night and decided to prepare in advance. And when the crew arrived, I was already in the pool. The director was thrilled with the tricks in the water, but shaggy cameraman Rick was scowling at me. And then the director said it was necessary to show the audience something unique. I had to demonstrate how my legs turned into a tail. I was a real mermaid after all, not a girl in a suit. I seriously panicked and answered that I was tired. Maybe we'll continue tomorrow. The director reluctantly agreed, and I was relieved. There was time to think. But the cameraman Rick hissed that he had been working on the show for years and knew that there were no miracles and I was lying. I felt the chills run up my back. Did he want to reveal me? It was uneasy all evening. How could I show that my legs would become a tail? And by midnight, I had an idea. In the morning, I got up before everyone else and glued my tail to the pool wall. Just wanted it all to work out. Filming soon began. I said in a trembling voice that I would now show what no one had seen before, turning my legs into a tail, and sat down on the edge of the pool, lowering my legs above the tail. Be calm, Una. The main thing was to do it neatly. I simultaneously climbed into the tail and fell into the water. I got it! But it was too early to rejoice. I realized that I couldn't make a move. The tail got stuck on the edge. That's the end. I jerked. There was a sound of torn fabric. Everyone heard it. But the director only clapped his hands. It seemed he didn't notice anything. All day, Rick was glaring at me, and in the evening, he suddenly declared he read that mermaids have a beautiful voice. I just had to sing for the audience. To my horror, the director picked up on this idea. So tomorrow, I had to charm everyone with my singing. God, I can't hit the notes. After filming, when everyone left, I took my tail off in a moment. Damn, it was torn. I rushed into the room and started to sew the tail, if no one could see it. Then I started surfing the internet. It was past midnight and I needed to find a suitable voice. I downloaded a relatively good record and in the middle of the night, pulled speakers out of the living room to the backyard. I hope no one notices me lip-syncing. I opened my eyes from a persistent knock on the door. Hell, I forgot to set the alarm and overslept. I always got up before the crew came to discreetly put on the tail, and now there were a lot of people in the yard. I shouted to the director that I was warming up. It took time and rushed back to look for the tail. I think I put it in the wash yesterday. Damn. I burst into the bathroom and immediately opened the washing machine, but that turned out to be empty. I was in panic. Someone stole my tail. Probably this Rick decided to set me up. I went back to my room and almost screamed with despair. Farewell, my dream of popularity. And then my gaze fell on the balcony, where things were drying. My heart almost stopped. Among the bedding hung my tail. What? And then I remembered that I did it myself. Because of lack of sleep, I managed to forget about it. Now it was necessary to distract everyone somehow while I was taking it off. I looked under my legs and saw a pebble. The next second, it flew straight into a tripod standing under the balcony. The camera with a rumble fell on the ground. While the team hastily collected the equipment, I yanked my tail, ran into the yard, and wearing it, jumped into the pool. Trying to hide the excitement, I got the remote, which I hid in the fence, and turned on the speakers. A singer's voice rang out over the whole yard. I opened my mouth to the song, and even for a second, I believed that I was singing myself. How suddenly the column fell silent. I froze, feeling the heart jumping out of my chest. The team looked at me with anticipation. Then I coughed and sang the phrase myself. I thought it was the end, but the director suddenly started applauding me. The whole team applauded. The director said that he had never seen mermaids. But after my performance, there was no doubt that I was real. By the evening, when the team started to pack things, Rick approached me. He grinned discontentedly that it would be over soon. But not in the way I thought it would be. A shiver ran through my body. What's he up to? Then Rick stated that on the final day, I would have to show the real life of the mermaid. I would have to spend a day underwater. What? I protested, but the director supported Rick again. Within myself, I wailed with despair. But there was no choice. World glory was at stake. A little more and I'm there. So in the middle of the night, I went to my parents' garage. My mother said she was diving, and I really needed help. I was sorting the boxes for a long time, but there was only trash. In despair, I was ready to break down. But then I propped up against the closet. The door opened and I saw an oxygen cylinder inside. The size was suitable. I could hide it in a tail. If only there was enough oxygen for a day. In the morning, I was shaking with tension, but immersed myself in the water, trying to stretch an oxygen tube through the swimsuit. Una, you can do it. A day underwater. That's okay. The first time was not difficult. I showed tricks and depicted a happy face. But then the operator called me on the surface. I'll finally exhale. I surfaced, and he only mockingly asked, "The mermaid did not go hungry?" And then he handed me algae. The director agreed with him. I was a mermaid and would eat them underwater. It was so nasty. I tried to chew and breathe through the tube at the same time, and all because of Rick. When half an hour was left before the end of the life, oxygen was almost at zero. I tried to take shallow breaths, but the director asked me to show the signature somersault under the water. Suddenly my head was swirling, and I grazed the tube with my hand. Not that! I tried to breathe in and froze. Oxygen did not go. Oh no, did I really damage the tube? It was impossible to retreat. It was necessary to hold out at all costs. Only 7 minutes to go. I held my breath for as long as I could, but suddenly everything around started to go dark. The last thing I remembered was how I slowly sank to the bottom of the pool and passed out. I woke up in the hospital room. I came to my senses for a long time when I noticed the phone on my bedside table. With trembling hands, I opened the show on YouTube. It was scary, but I wanted to know what happened. I thought I was hated, but I was surprised when I started reading comments. The video had already been watched by 6 million people. The audience wrote that they were worried about me and loved me very much for bravery. It didn't matter that I was not a real mermaid. It was important that I wasn't scared to overcome myself and become her. Tears welled up in my eyes. So I can be interesting without the tail? At this point, my parents rushed to me, but they had to be at the party. I thought I would get a scolding, but instead, Mom and Dad hugged me. Mom kissed me. She was very scared and asked me why I made it up. I did not hold back tears. I just wanted someone to need me. Dad sighed and said it was their fault. They should have paid me more attention. rather than trying to catch up on youth at hangouts. Now they saw how I needed their support and love. When I was discharged from the hospital, my parents took me to the sea for me to rest. Now I had a lot of subscribers, all asking when a new life would be. But I said I was not up to it yet. It was important now to spend time with my family. Later, I got a call from Rick. He regretted that it came out like that. He thought about the show and never wanted anything bad to happen to me. At this point, I realized that it was stupid to suspect Rick. We laughed at the story for a long time, and then Rick wished me luck, saying that after meeting me, he believed in a miracle. On the last evening before leaving, I decided to swim in the sea, but as I entered the water, my legs began to tingle. I looked down and didn't believe my eyes. Can't be! There was a tail in place of my feet! Real! I was blown over. It turns out, miracles happen. You only need to believe in them with your best.
Hi, I'm Diana. I'm 15 years old, and I love crows. Have you ever needed a friend's help? To borrow money, or to help with a test? Or to beat the offender? What if that friend was a crow? Watch this video to the end and find out what can repay the kindness of a smart bird. I have always wanted to have animals, but I was faced with the same problem, my dad. My dad is a unique person who combines 50% anger, 30% rage, 19% stubbornness, and just 1% sanity. That's my dad. Once, we had such a severe winter in our town that even people in fur coats were cold outside. But I had to get out because I remembered that I hadn't parked my bike in the garage. And next to it, I saw a crow. It was injured. There was something wrong with its wing, and it was limping. I thought that it would not survive in this weather, and I shivered. Oh, I could get into trouble for this. I grabbed the crow and, cursing under my breath, carried it into the house. Dad raged all night, but for once, I didn't listen to him. The crow would die if I threw it out, and I didn't want to kill animals. Have you ever stood up for your principles in the face of a man who could break you in half? Ugh, what a feeling. I suggested Dad to wait until spring, and in return, I would not let Quasi, as I called my foundling, out of the room. Dad didn't like the idea. He said he wouldn't wash bird droppings. But I, after all, was also very angry and stubborn, and I could insist on my own. During the winter, we became very friendly with Quasi, and I almost cried when I let her out into the woods. But I had to let her out because she was stronger and could fly safely, and Dad was getting more and more angry. How was I to know that she would not leave me? Quasi began to fly to our lawn, sometimes even with friends. Good thing it always happened during the day when Dad wasn't home. I was very afraid of his anger, and I taught Quasi to fly not to the lawn, but a little further away, to the trash next to the forest. Then, there I hung out with them, fed them, and occasionally did homework. It was great. I felt like a superhero, a girl mistress of the crows. And so, my 2 years passed. But one time, a complete mess happened. I went with my crows to the trash, and Ramona noticed me. She was a stupid and evil viper from a rich family. Everybody was trying to butter her up because otherwise she would ruin your whole life. She was with her henchmen and started pointing like, "LOL, look, she's a bum." What could I say? Have you ever defended your honor with fists? I lunged at Ramona, but her friends intercepted me and started pulling my hair. And then, this happened. Damn, this! A flock of crows gathered above us, and they began to attack the kids. I didn't even notice how many of them appeared. The birds attacked Ramona and her friends, but they didn't touch me. There was a scandal waiting for me at home. A good scandal. I told my mother everything, and instead of feeling sorry for me, she told my father. He arrived in the evening in a ferocious rage. During this time, the parents of Ramona and these guys called us and started complaining, saying, "Your girl beat up our children." Oh, and the evil and terrible Diana single-handedly beat up 2 guys and 3 girls. Who would believe that? Dad and Mom believed it. Most of all, they were angry that I continued to feed my crows and, as they thought, set them on their abusers. All I'd been listening to all night was that my next prey would end up in jail. What was I supposed to do? Obediently take the insults? But Dad wouldn't listen to me. He locked me in my room, took a rifle, and went to shoot the crows. I only heard 2 shots, but each of them wounded my heart. What if he had killed the quasi? Why were they doing this to me? I hated them. The attacks on me at school only increased. I was called Queen of the Trash. And one of Ramona's assholes stuffed a crow's corpse into my backpack. I started running away from school in tears. And I really didn't want to go home, but I had to. My father organized a kind of house arrest. Well, so that my mother immediately picked me up from school and did not let me out on the street later. I was angry. They drove me crazy. Have you ever felt that the whole world is against you? That no one wants to understand you? I was crushed these days. But one day, I saw Quasi again on the lawn. We didn't see her again until the summer. Probably my smart girl realized that there was no one else at home and decided to beckon. She looked at me and jumped a little ahead. I left the house and followed her. Quasi led me to a house in the woods, and there I saw a bunch of crows and a boy my age, maybe a little older. Quasi sat on his shoulder and he asked what I was doing here. I told him about Quasi, and the boy was relieved and happy. He said that his name was Jamie, and that he was the owner of Quasi and the other crows. Jamie and I quickly found a common language. He fed them and trained them, just like me. And he was laughed at school too. It was great to find someone with similar problems. We started meeting, talking. He taught me how to train crows, and in general, he turned out to be a good friend. I almost believed that something good could come into my life. Alas, a couple of months later, my parents announced that we were moving to another city. And it was my fault, they said. I ruined our family's precious reputation. I shouted back that I would rather live in a dumpster and ran into the woods in tears. I met Jamie there. The news upset him as much as it did me. And he said he had a present for me then. I swallowed my tears and thought resentfully, when would he have given this gift if I hadn't turned out that we were going to break up? But all my skepticism went out of my head when he brought me a beautiful silver ring with a raven's head on it. He said that it was his mother's ring, that it had become too small for her, and that she'd allowed him to give it to the crow's friend, as she called me behind my back. I cried even more, and promised him that I would never forget him without the ring. But I didn't refuse from it. For some reason, I felt I had to keep it. What would you do if your parents drastically changed your life without even asking for your permission? Parents are not classmates. You can't just go over and fight them. So they always take a high hand over their children. I let them move in, but I didn't let them get the crows and Jamie out of my heart. I was waiting for the call, for the letter, for anything. I spent days looking at the ring and thinking of my best friend and our crows. Nothing. Silence. A complete zero. But you know I'm not one to give up easily. A year later, I came to the city when I started my vacation. A school friend let me stay, and on the first day I told her, okay, I'll go to Jamie. To whom? She asked. To Jamie. What's the problem? Lucia hesitated for a long time, and finally told me the terrible thing, after which I fell into a chair. It turned out that Jamie died just a few months after I left. He climbed to the roof to fix it, and broke his neck in the fall. His mother left town because she couldn't live in a house that reminded her of her son. I was speechless. So that's why Jamie didn't write to me. I should have known that I should have come as soon as it happened. But how could I know? I cried all evening and all night, and the next morning, I rode my bike to Jamie's abandoned house. The crows were still nestling there, and I swear to you, they were happy to see me. The house barely appeared on the horizon, and they were already rushing toward me. They surrounded me and cawed loudly, as if asking where I'd been for so long. I looked at the ring, then at the sky, and realized that if a person's soul didn't go to heaven, then it had to become a bird. And maybe Jamie, my best friend, got lost among those crows. I went back to my new home, but I didn't forget my friends. I am determined to connect my life with the birds, in memory of Jamie. Recently, my mother apologized to me for all that time. I don't know what made her do it, but I told her about going on vacation, and for the first time, I was able to cry properly. And my dad? Well, I'm sure I took after him in my stubbornness. One day he will say, "I'm sorry" to me, but I don't think it'll be for a long time.
Hi, my name is Claire. I'm 16. I'm just a normal teenager. Or I was, until recently. Have you ever dreamed of superpowers like those of comic book superheroes? Imagine that you have it, and because of this, life has become noticeably more difficult. Watch to the end, and you will learn how I learned to have X-ray vision. Recently, my mom and dad and I moved to a new house, and I had to go to a new school. I was very afraid that I would not be able to find friends quickly. I always thought I was a little strange and different from my peers. I often noticed that I had strange dreams, and that I could feel if a person next to me was sad or unwell. My strange sensitivity, as I called it, was always treated poorly by my classmates. This was because I once asked my classmate Jack to be careful on his bike on the way to school because I had a bad dream. I didn't know why I asked him so confidently, because it was just a dream. But on the way, his bike chain caught in his pants just like in my dream, and he fell to the side of the road. Jack came up to me with a bandaged leg and gave me the honorific crazy. That's how it got to me. So I was afraid that history would repeat itself and decided to keep my mouth shut. But surprisingly, everyone in the class seemed to be happy with me and sometimes paid too much attention to me. I quickly became friends with the guys, and I even started to like school, which I had not noticed before. Do you quickly get used to new people? I finally started to understand biology, and I loved it so much that I wanted to go to medical school next year. It seemed that my life had changed a lot, and for the better. So I thought, until my crazy echo of the past caught up with me in the new place. In the morning, as usual, going to school, I realized that my eyes hurt a lot. I remembered the words of my beloved grandmother and blamed it on the computer in my life. My father didn't take me to school that morning because he had a bad stomach ache and didn't know what to do with it for 4 days. My mother nervously put me in my father's car and drove me to school. I saw how she was going through it, and I wanted to calm her down. I still don't know how I saw it, but when I looked at my dad, I saw that there was something wrong with his pancreas. It was highlighted brown on his stomach. I told my mother that. She pretended that I didn't say anything strange and just said, "I guess I should check it out." I could see that she wasn't taking my words seriously, but Dad was in so much pain that he was ready to believe anything to make him feel better. And he was checked. Dad was diagnosed with pancreatic inflammation. He was urgently sent for surgery, and the doctor added that it was discovered just in time. At the hospital, my dad thanked me and said that I had the talent of a doctor. And I didn't know what to call it. I just saw what was inside him. Then I started to see what was inside the others. My classmate, Judy, had hernia in her back. The math teacher had heart failure. At first, it was fun to watch other people's organs, how they moved, how they didn't look like each other. But then it started to make me afraid. Because I could see, but I couldn't tell. And the person was suffering. There was a feeling of impotence. But how? And most importantly, what do I say? "Excuse me, I have X-ray vision, and you should get your heart checked out because you have a blocked valve on the right ventricle of the heart." I would have laughed in the face of the person who told me this at best and at worst, handed them over to a mental hospital. After living like this for another 3 months, I realized that it was unbearable. I told my mother that I could see the organs of all the people around me. My mother always knew what to do, and I thought that here too she would find the perfect solution. And the next week, we went to a science center. At first, I thought we were just going to the doctor, until the door slammed and we were on opposite sides of that door with my parents. Great. At that moment, I felt that my parents had brazenly betrayed me. Where did they send me? What for? I was filled with resentment and fear. I did not understand what was coming. Experiments began on me. I was placed in solitary confinement as a criminal. There was a bed, toilet, TV, pillows, and food. Well, yes, I agree, not the most terrible cell of a prisoner. But it did not save me from the thought, when will all this end? Each morning began with tests, injections, and conversations with a man who called himself a doctor but confused medical terms. I hope he was just nervous. Then conversations with a psychologist about my childhood and parents. I didn't want to talk about them at all. Have you ever been very offended by your parents? Then you will understand for sure. The last straw of these incompetent experiments for me was the literal cruelty of the orderly. When I refused to take a pill, the employee hit me on the shoulder. I took the pill and realized that I had to run away from here. This was not easy because I was only allowed out on the street once a day at about noon and with a guard. I'm still sure that I was helped by some kind of miracle. Well, or hormones, because the guard was in love with the nurse and missed the moment of my escape. And now I was waving at him from the back of the gate. The problem with the terrible conclusion was solved, but I did not think where I would go after this prison. The only options I had were my parents, my grandmother, or an independent life. My parents might put me in that prison again, or I might become a tramp in a white shirt, which was not a pleasant prospect either. So it seemed that going to my grandmother was the only sensible and pleasant option. My grandmother welcomed me with joy. I told her everything I'd been through. She was angry and promised to scold my mother for doing this to me. Grandma is funny when she's angry, and I was glad that I found support in her. Everything seemed to start going as usual. I went back to school. I didn't miss much during the week. This week passed for me as a painful year, and everyone else in school had only 3 math lessons. And even these terrible pictures of sick people around me disappeared. I even wondered if I was imagining it. Then it was even more insulting that I was in this cage of torture for nothing. But I couldn't believe that these organs everywhere had stopped tormenting me. Just like I couldn't believe my grandmother had turned me in. She told my parents where I was. And here were my precious parents standing on the doorstep with a guilty face and thinking that I would forgive them just for showing up on the doorstep of a house where they were not expected. I looked at my grandmother with the question, "Why are you doing this to me?" She was the first to speak. She said that I got it wrong and my parents didn't know what I was going through. My mother continued and apologetically told how it really was. They took me to the examination and diagnosis of the brain to understand the cause of this phenomenon. They had no intention of dumping me on the test. Doctors, under the pretext of suspicion of brain disorders, urged my parents to leave me for free treatment. My parents got scared and of course they said yes. And only when they came home they began to suspect that something was wrong. Doctors did not give them the pictures of my head, refused to let them see me, and even took away my phone. My mother got scared and started coming to the hospital every day. The nurse, in confidence, said that I was missing. My mother almost turned gray in the emergency room. She began to swear and called for the chief doctor, but there was no answer. My grandmother made the responsible decision to tell her that I was fine. I suppose I would have done the same, though I thought it was unfair and cruel of her at the time. It was like my heart was released. I realized that no one had betrayed me, and my parents didn't get rid of me as a monster that could tarnish their reputation. They love me and really want to help. My mother was determined and went to court to deal with the offenders. I don't know exactly what happened with the pseudoscience center. My mother was happy, so she had won the court. From her, I learned what really happened to me. The whole story with X-ray vision turned out to be my wild imagination and passion for medicine, plus overwork. I wasn't even upset that I wasn't special anymore. It was important to me that I was finally free from torment and that I could help people with my talent to heal and not with my ability to see the invisible. And now I can say what and where it hurts, only sometimes using medical tricks. And I am already looking forward to my work as a doctor, which will help hundreds and hopefully thousands of people.
I'm a psychic. My gift is to heal with my hands. But this time, the client was special, Bill White. He wanted to get rid of the memories that tormented him terribly. I touched him, but suddenly, everything went dark. At that moment, a strange vision came to me. Someone is approaching my mom. She runs to the stairs, wants to go down. And then I saw that my mom was lying on the steps unconscious. And up there was Bill White, my client. The vision ended in a bright flash. And I went blind. Panicked, I called out to him, but all I heard was the door slam. He ran away. I was terrified. It was pitch black, and I couldn't even make out the outlines of objects. And the last thing I saw was my mom's murder. What happened? Everyone in town knew I could heal, but I've never had a vision. I just helped people get rid of their pain. And that's all. Although my own pain hasn't gone away for years, it was different. For as long as I can remember, I have been tormented by the question, who is responsible for the death of my mom? It happened when I was 6. I only vaguely remembered crying over my mom's body, and then the policeman took me to the orphanage. After a few years of living in the orphanage, I realized I had a gift. At first, I healed children in the orphanage, and after graduation, I was given an apartment. There I received patients. Those who were recovering told each other about it, and people began to come to me from all over the city. Apparently, Bill White came to me the same way, and it seems that in our session, I discovered the ability to see the past. Perhaps Bill knew something about my mom's murder. I was trying to figure out how to find him. All I remembered about him was a mole above his upper lip, just like mine. Then I thought of Matt, the cop I'd helped with a terrible migraine. I should call him. But it was difficult to move by touch. I was constantly dropping something or hitting the corners of the furniture. There was darkness everywhere. Finally, I found my phone by touch and went to contacts from memory. I started calling everyone and finally heard Matt's voice on the phone. It worked. I told him about the strange client and my vision on my mom's death. But Matt said that he was suspended from the service and no longer engaged in investigations. At that moment, all my hopes were dashed. I had no one else to turn to. An hour passed, 2 hours, and all of a sudden, Matt called me back. He said that he had thought it over and was ready to help. And he had his reasons. Matt said that when he was working as a detective, his wife was killed. He tried to find the culprit himself, collected evidence, and found the address of the person. But in the end, he didn't have time to arrest him. The killer committed suicide. After that, Matt couldn't do business like he used to, and he retired. Every killer must be punished. Matt finished. An hour later, he was at my house. Matt asked for my laptop to hack into the police database. After a long search, we found the street where Bill White lived. Matt was trying to get the house number. But suddenly, the system blocked us. Heck, at least we had a lead. In the evening, we reached the outskirts of the city. We had to look for White here. We went to all the houses on the street. No one heard of Bill. We were already going back. Then Matt noticed the house with boarded up windows. We got closer and went up to the porch, and suddenly, I felt dizzy. I grabbed a railing and The vision came to me again. Fake images appeared and I realized that Bill White was definitely here. We had to get inside the house. Matt kept saying that there was a patrol running around the area and if we got caught, we'd be arrested for breaking and entering. But I said that I would go alone or with him. I would get into this house. Matt sighed heavily and agreed. With a terrible crash, he broke off a couple of boards at the entrance to the house. I froze. Did someone hear us? We quickly went inside. I asked Matt to stay close while I read White's energy. I felt the walls and the remaining furniture in the rooms and hoped that another vision would come to me. Suddenly, Matt stopped. He said that there was a photo on the wall. There's a man with a girl. She looks like you. Matt chuckled. He took the picture down from the wall. And I picked it up. Another flash. A vision. Someone gives me a toy and... Then I heard a car drive up to the house with the siren on. Let's go, Matt whispered to me. And a second later, there was a terrible crash as the cops broke into the house. I hesitated, but Matt grabbed my arm. And we ran as fast as we could. I heard a cop chasing us, but at the last moment, Matt pushed him away and we ran out of the house. I was exhausted, but Matt said we couldn't stop. Only when we were far enough away did he call a taxi. All the way, I clutched that picture in my hands, but the vision didn't appear. I asked Matt to describe the man in the photo. White cheekbones, a mole near the lips, Matt said. It was Bill White. I remembered that he had the same mole as me. I asked Matt to take the photo to the station and find out something about White. Who was this girl? Maybe she would give us another clue. Matt said he wasn't welcome at the police station, but he tried to do something. Matt didn't answer his phone the next day, and it wasn't until late afternoon that he called. It turned out that he was detained, and he was in the police station. He was turned in by the same cop who ran after us. Matt said he would only be released on bail. Hell, I was the one who put him where he used to put criminals. I had to help him. I groped my way to the locker where I kept my savings and took out all the money. I hoped that would be enough. With difficulty, I got out of the house and went to the sound of cars on the highway. I had never hitched a ride blindly before. Finally, some guy took pity and agreed to give me a ride. When Matt was released, I told him I couldn't ask for his help anymore. If he got caught again, he could be sent to prison. But Matt said that we would see this through. Together, he swore on his police honor that he would not back down. Oh, Matt. He also said that while he was in the police station, he found out something. The man in the photo was really Bill White. Matt hesitated a little. He sighed heavily and said that Bill was my father. No way. So the girl in the photo with him was me? Resentment seethed inside me. How could he leave me? I was beginning to think that White had something to do with my mom's death. Why else would he run away after she was killed? The next morning, we drove to one of the poor neighborhoods where White might be. Matt talked to the beggars, but no one knew anything. We were about to leave. But then a ragamuffin said he knew White. For a couple of dollars, he told us that this strange White recently lived in an abandoned building. And then I felt he was right. White was very close. I followed my gut. Matt and I went down to the basement of a house. And the feeling grew stronger. White was here. I called his name and immediately heard quick footsteps. White decided to run away again. Police! Freeze! Matt shouted and ran after Bill. Matt quickly caught up with him. I heard him push Bill to the floor and then the handcuffs clicked. Bill was breathing heavily and no longer struggling. Then Matt began the interrogation. White admitted that all his life he was tormented by a conscience for what he did to his wife. He hoped that the psychic would help him get rid of the heartache, but I felt bad, and he was afraid. We were fighting. I pushed my wife and she fell down the stairs. White said painfully. I still hate myself for running away. For leaving my daughter. I tried to find her, but without success. I'd like to know how is she now. White finished. I was shaking and couldn't speak. But in the end, I decided. Bill, I'm the girl you left behind. I'm your daughter. There was a tense silence. A moment later, Bill burst into tears and begged for forgiveness. Tears began to run down my cheeks too, and I realized that I bared no grudge against Bill, and suddenly, I've got my sight back. Unbelievable! Seeing the world again was a miracle. And I realized that as soon as I forgave my father, my illness went away. It's like I've been given a second chance to make things right. I didn't know what to do next. Matt was waiting for me to call the cops because my dad had actually killed my mom. But I wasn't in a hurry to get my phone out. All my life I've wanted to punish a murderer, but do I want it now?